Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns 24/7, joined, as always, by our fearless leader, the managing editor of Horns 24/7, the one and only Taylor Estes. And Taylor, I am broadcasting from the Iowa State coaches booth in the press box here at Jack Trice Stadium. And for the fourth consecutive game, the coaches who sat in this room made better halftime adjustments and turned this game once again into a tale of two halves. Now, we did not get the quick start offensively at all, which I thought would be the case this week. I said on the Flagship podcast this week that I thought Texas was going to be fighting from behind in this game, although they did lead at halftime, Taylor.
Right.
But my gosh, the third quarter, the defense, which played brilliantly for a half, gave out. The quarterback play was atrocious. 9 3-and-outs. They had more 3-and-outs than points in this game. They lose 30-7. And suffer a fourth straight loss for the first time since 2010, when Texas went 5-7 under Mac Brown. And now Steve Sarkisian, who sounds like a broken record, he has a mess on his hands on offense with no clear direction at quarterback.
Yeah, and that's, the worst place that I think that, and especially an offensive-minded head coach, but a team in general can be. Texas is now 9 games into the season, and, for the second time this season has pulled the starting quarterback, except this time Casey Thompson was pulled in the first quarter, later in the first quarter for Hudson Card. Steve Sarkisian, after the game, talked about how he was looking for a spark on offense. Hudson, to give that offense a little bit of credit, in the second quarter, they at least were able to find the end zone, the only points of the game for Texas. But the second half, again, it's, I know a lot of people are down on the defense, and I feel like I probably defend them a lot, but when your offense is not doing its job and not converting on third downs and putting up more third down or, failed third down conversions than points, in a game, then you're setting your defense up for failure. And that's exactly what happened here at Texas now, with 3 games left of the regular, or excuse, how many, 3 games, left of the regular season. Texas all of a sudden doesn't know who their starting quarterback is. And Texas is not bowl eligible. They have to win 2 of these 3 games in order to go to a bowl game if they want to see the postseason. And now they have a quarterback controversy. And that's probably the last place that Steve Sarkisian wanted to be in, and probably the last place that he expected that this team and this offense would be in, after 9 games on the year.
Yeah. It's this offense was worse tonight than it was in week 2. In a 40-21 loss at Arkansas. This was week 9. And the offense is worse than it was in week 2. We talk about, the sign of a well-coached team is week-to-week improvement. This football team, this offense, because you're right, the defense, let's give the defense a little bit of love, because at halftime, they had held Iowa State to 1 of 7 third down conversions, only 3 points. And those 3 points came after Bijan Robinson fumbled on UT's first drive in UT territory. Iowa State had first and goal from the 10, and Josh Thompson took over, made 3 big plays on consecutive plays, including a pass breakup on 3rd and goal to force a 24-yard field goal.
That huge pass breakup. Yeah, that was huge.
But they held Breece Hall to, 2 yards a carry, 40 yards rushing total in the first half. The Texas defense was doing it, and you just kept waiting for the Texas offense to figure it out. There were guys open. Hudson Card got more and more, jittery. He had the 14-play drive. That Josh Moore, of all people, who didn't play at all in the first quarter, was held out. He had the blow up with Steve Sarkisian on Wednesday after Moore showed up late to practice. He comes in the second quarter and makes the offensive play of the game. On 3rd and 7, he catches a 2-yard slant and takes it 24 yards. That extended that 14-play touchdown drive that Texas ended up scoring on 3rd and goal on a little 4-yard flip pass to from Card to Xavier Worthy that put Texas up 7-3, and they held that lead and into halftime. They had another golden opportunity. Taylor, Calvante Dixon blocks a punt, and Texas right away on 1st down calls a deep shot to Xavier Worthy. He's 5 yards clear of Iowa State's defensive back, and Hudson Card leads him way too much. It's not even close, and Worthy would have walked in for the touchdown. Texas could have gone into halftime up 14-3. They end up melting down on the rest of that drive. Xavier Worthy ends up getting a penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct. They end up punting from their own end on 4th and 19. And that was a sign of things to come, Taylor, because they had 5 straight 3-and-outs that ended up going for minus 25 yards. They were going backward. And all the while in the third quarter, Iowa State finally, beats the Texas defense. They beat them with a long run by Breece Hall. They beat them with a double pass trick play that Baylor also beat them with last week. And then, the floodgates open. Texas gets outscored 21-0 in the third quarter. It's over and out. And I thought they would bring Casey Thompson back in, Taylor, because, Hudson Card, God bless him, he was getting more and more jittery in the pocket. He was leaving the pocket, and his offensive linemen didn't know where he was. So they're getting called for holding because they think he's in the pocket. But once he breaks the pocket, they have to let go of the defender or it's holding. And one after the other, they had 4 penalties in the third quarter. 3 of them were holding on the offensive line because Card was racing out of the pocket. It was a disaster. It was an unmitigated disaster. Card, got called for intentional grounding at one point. He was out of the tackle box, but couldn't get the ball past the line of scrimmage. And there were, it was just a mess. Iowa State declined 3 penalties in the third quarter because Texas had already botched the play. So, it could have been worse. And this was a total meltdown by the Texas offense tonight. And Iowa State was gettable. This was a 7-3 game, Texas leading at halftime.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Chip, it's kind of funny when you go through the stat sheet that Texas sent out to us after the game that has the detailed stats to see the amount of QB hurries that Iowa State was able to get on Hudson Card as the game wore on in the second half. It is a little reminiscent, I think, of the way that the Arkansas game played out with him, being a redshirt freshman. He gets antsy in the pocket. Steve Sarkisian talked about that in his post-game press conference. And, he said he tried to essentially get Hudson Card to settle his feet down and focus on his vision. He said, because, if a quarterback feels that there's pressure on them, sometimes it may not even be there, but they feel it and they start getting antsy. They can make it work if they have good vision. And so that was something that Hudson Card still has to work on, obviously, especially when he's getting pressure in the pocket and, trying to scramble and make a play. He was kind of forcing some plays, but part of you almost don't blame it a little bit again, because there is just so much pressure in his face. And I feel like Casey Thompson's been dealing with that a lot in the last few games too. And even to start this game, with the Texas offense after that opening fumble on the opening drive of the game, going 3 straight 3-and-outs. This was just the only glimpse of potential progress is, we talked about was the 1 touchdown drive, but then the fact that Texas had the chance to get more points on the board before halftime, then they go 3-and-out for a negative drive. That shut all the momentum down going into halftime for the Texas offense. And there was already so limited momentum at that point. And, Yeah, I totally agree with you. Iowa State, this was a gettable Iowa State team. I feel that Texas really, the defense played well enough in this game, at least for 2.5 quarters, to win the game. Because if the offense would have done anything, honestly, anything, like anything, I mean, then they probably would have been more in the ball game as it, the clock wore on. I don't know if it would have ended, on a win for Texas, but the fact that we can only point to essentially one drive by the Texas offense where things got going. That's a terrible sign. And that's a terrible sign, especially in, the ninth game of the season. And I mean, at this point, you look at the rest of the games, Chip, there's Kansas, there's West Virginia, and then there's Kansas State. I mean, I think Kansas should be a win, but there's a good chance that the other two, there may be another loss left on the schedule for Texas if they cannot figure out how to get some momentum working in their favor and consistency going on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas in Austin, that game is set for 6:30 next Saturday. The Big 12 announced right after the Texas-Iowa State game. And before we get to the fact that they will have to go to West Virginia before coming home to finish the season against Kansas State, we should say Bijan Robinson, who left the game in the fourth quarter, Texas announced after the game he had a neck strain, but that x-rays were negative. Mm-hmm. And so Bijan Robinson, who had a season low 43 yards rushing on 17 carries last week against Baylor, finished with 90 yards rushing on 18 carries and had a team leading 8 receptions for 36 yards. But again,
he can't be the only weapon. Like that's the thing. I mean, he is a lethal weapon for this offense. And you have to think about it at this point, Chip, like if there was even some consistency in the passing game and the pass protection, this is Bijan Robinson's not only, being limited to less than 100 yards on the ground and no touchdowns. I just don't see that scenario happening if there's any type of consistency or any type of production from the offensive line and the passing game. And
well, I mean, the biggest, this team, is without an answer at quarterback right now. I mean, Casey Thompson comes out. I mean, had Marcus Washington open over the middle and bounced it like 4 yards in front of him. I mean, it was clear Casey was not feeling it.
Yeah, he was shaking a little bit.
I'm not surprised. They go to Hudson Card and they got a first down with a couple of 6-yard Bijan Robinson runs. And then, they flame out on that drive, a 5-play drive. Then they get the 14-play touchdown drive. And, Hudson Card converted a 3rd and 3 with his legs. He converts the 3rd and 7 with the quick slant to Josh Moore that turns into a 24-yard gain. And then they get the touchdown on the flip pass to Xavier Worthy. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, look at this. Texas is going to flip the script on Iowa State and flip it on everybody. But then 5 straight 3-and-outs, Taylor, that span the end of the second quarter, including that deep ball miss to Xavier Worthy when he was wide open, much like Casey Thompson missing Xavier Worthy last week against Baylor. And if you don't have an answer at quarterback, you have no chance. And that's what's stunning. Is that this is Steve Sarkisian's offense. We are in week 9. They, both Casey Thompson, Hudson Card have had all season to digest this offense. I get that Jordan Whittington is not a part of this offense anymore, but it can't be that. Right. And then, you put out a performance like this where you have more 3-and-outs than 9, then you have points. Mm-hmm. At this stage of the season, I don't care who you're playing. This is frightening. And I get it's year 1 and Steve Sarkisian needs players, but I'm not gonna bury this offensive line tonight because there were receivers open for both Casey Thompson and Hudson Card. And they weren't ready. Now, I would have gone back to Casey Thompson because Hudson Card was clearly jittery and he was getting more jittery and getting sacked more as the game went on. And again, much like the Arkansas game, it's clear to everybody that Hudson Card doesn't have it tonight. Go back to Casey Thompson, see if he's been able to kind of settle himself. And I mean, this game wasn't out of hand until, the fifth 3 and out. And by then, Iowa State had opened the floodgates. But after the game, Steve Sarkisian talked about all we can do is keep working. The players, no one said anything in the locker room after the game among the players, according to Hudson Card. He said players were in their feelings a bit after the game. Keandre Coburn said, it's frustrating. And Ovia Gofu said, we have to keep pushing forward. And he said, I believe in Steve Sarkisian. I believe in this coaching staff. The rest of that locker room has to do the same, because what happened this week with Josh Moore showing up late to practice, the blow up with Steve Sarkisian, these are things that are little things that, some people said we shouldn't have even reported on it. That's dead wrong. We absolutely should have reported on it. We did report on it, because when little things start to slip, you start to understand why an offense 9 games into the season could put out that garbage performance here in Ames tonight. This is staggering. And Steve Sarkisian's going to have a lot of work on his hands to keep this team believing. This performance tonight on offense was horrible. It reminds me of the 3 and out-a-thon, when Sam Ehlinger was a freshman against Oklahoma State. The defense played great. The offense couldn't do a thing. And it's just surprising with Steve Sarkisian, the mastermind. He was brought here to Texas because he's an offensive mastermind who could match wits with Lincoln Riley, who's got experience in the SEC. This team is so far from SEC ready right now. It's unbelievable. And I don't know that they can get all the players they need, Taylor, in one recruiting cycle. They're going to have to be absolutely surgical in what they take in the portal and in this recruiting class to be able to get this where it needs to be SEC ready.
Yeah, there's no denying that Texas needs playmakers, and that's the thing that when Steve Sarkisian was at Alabama, count the number of players on the offenses that he coached that are in the NFL right now. There's quite a few, and I can't point to one right now that Texas besides Bijan Robinson, I'd say, but there are very few. I'd have to really, rack my brain to figure out which offensive playmakers will be, drafted or playing in the NFL. I think Jordan Whittington, obviously, I think that what you're seeing too, Chip, especially with the lack of production on third downs by the Texas offense in recent games, just goes to show even more how impactful Jordan Whittington was as that go-to third down receiver and that option that he had there. And,
But Steve Sarkisian talks all the time about how he coaches the entire roster so that guys are ready.
But there's not playmakers to do it. Like you can't coach talent.
Right. But
and that's what Texas
coaching
is lacking.
Is instilling these guys with confidence to make the plays.
Right.
It's, Calvante Dixon gets the start tonight. He had some nice plays on special teams. He had the block punt. He downed a punt on the one, but he finishes with 1 catch for 8 yards. Josh Moore finishes with 2 catches for 32 yards. Xavier Worthy, 2 catches, 22 yards. This is scary because Iowa State got lit up last week by West Virginia in Morgantown for 38 points. Jarrett Dagey threw for 400 yards, and Texas couldn't get a freaking first down tonight.
Yeah, there were 16 receptions for 103 yards. Mind you, 8 of those receptions were from a running back. So clearly the weakest spot right now, the passing game, Steve Sarkisian has talked about the lack of consistency in the passing game. He believes is what's leading to the second half collapses. He said that after the game. He said it's not necessarily, the lack of effort of the defense or anything along those lines. It's just the fact that the offense can't convert on, they can't generate any positive plays as the game wears on. They're struggling there, and then they're putting the defense on the field too much. And at that point, you're just setting your defense up to crack. And that's what you saw once again. I mean, for the third straight game for Texas, you saw that. And I mean, there's it's laughable almost. I mean, I know Texas fans aren't laughing right now, but it's kind of laughable if you actually look at the what the stats showed out for the passing game and the receiving game. You just
what
don't
are they
expect to
working
see
on
that
in practice? I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
second straight week they get a double pass pulled off against them, and for big plays. And where's where are the wrinkles? Where's the adjustments? This is the fourth straight game where players have come in after the game and said they made their adjustments and we didn't adjust as well as, they made better plays. I mean, it's look, you don't want the chandelier to come crashing down on the Steve Sarkisian era in year one.
Right.
The fan base is battered and bruised. They're sick and tired. They've been eating bleep burgers for over a decade, and they need hope. And what I said before the season is you just want to see this team get better every week and hope for a 9-3 season. Oh my gosh. I mean, you're not getting any of that.
No.
And you're not getting answers. And that's the hard part, Taylor, because if the players keep coming out and saying, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why this is happening. There's a disconnect. And the coaches, because it's every piece of this team has had a piece of the blame in this 4-game losing streak, but the answers have to come, and they got to come fast, because this is a team that has to get bowl eligible. And this is not what any of these players expected. This is gonna challenge Steve Sarkisian to earn every bit of the $5 million that he's getting paid this year to somehow finish this season strong.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, Chip, before the season, you and I both were kind of getting crushed by some Texas fans because I think you said, maybe a 9-win season. I was like, 9-win, you got to celebrate. 8 wins, be happy with 8 wins and be ecstatic, essentially, with 9 wins. I mean,
and we didn't even think Baylor was going to be good.
I know. And then Texas fans were like ripping us, being like, this is at least a 10-win team. This is why you can't expect that in year one of a coaching staff. And as you said, you don't want the year one to come crashing down on Steve Sarkisian, because that is only going to lead to uncertainty in recruiting in so many different areas. It has a lasting effect, especially if it's a year one head coach. But yeah, I mean, now at this point, Texas has to be hoping for 8 wins, because that's the best that they can finish. And it's, I'll say this, I thought that 8 wins was something that could have been done probably more easily than this, but I for sure did not think 8 wins would come if Texas wins out in the last 3 games of the regular season in the bowl game. But that's where Texas is right now. And, there's very little time to correct the mistakes. And there's a whole hell of a lot of mistakes right now and issues on this roster from top to bottom. And it goes on the coaches too. The lack of in-game adjustments. Other coaches are finding ways to adjust to what Texas is doing, and Texas has no answer. And that falls on the coaches. Yeah, I hate when people blame coaches, because I feel like Texas fans especially do blame coaches way too often and call for firing everybody, after like one loss or something like that. But you can't look at how teams are adjusting to your script or whatever, and then not take any accountability yourself for the fact that you couldn't make the adjustments in response to their adjustments. I mean, that's 100% coaching. They have to do a better job of that. And Steve Sarkisian's got to find a way to do it, and the whole staff does. And, this week, the opening script didn't work, how it has in weeks past.
And that's,
so,
the one thing you could say was, hey, we always got off to a good start. We've always been able to score quickly. We've always been able to move the football in the first half. Now that's gone. And now both your quarterbacks are in a fog, or we have to wait and see how they perform coming out of this, because Casey Thompson, say what you want, played well enough to win in 3 of the losses coming into tonight, or in 2 of the 3. He played brilliantly against Oklahoma. 5 touchdown passes, no turnovers. Did not play well against Oklahoma State. Threw the pick 6, threw another interception. Put the ball in the hands of his receivers. The receivers dropped the ball against Baylor. But tonight, Casey was off, and Steve Sarkisian did the right thing, bringing in Hudson Card. The question is, once Hudson Card started to struggle, do you go back to Casey Thompson? Because there's a lot riding on that decision going into this game against Kansas next Saturday at 6:30. And look, at this point, Taylor, every decision the coaches make is calculated. If certain players aren't getting on the field, you have to start thinking, are the coaches trying to run that player off? Are they, because it's clear Steve Sarkisian has said he doesn't like the makeup of this roster. He doesn't like that there are 18 scholarship pass catchers and only, 10 offensive linemen who, I noted that Tyler Johnson, who was once a 5-star recruit, didn't even travel to this game.
Yeah.
He was a player the Herman regime wanted to really build up and coach up coming into this season. They felt like he was a guy who was, okay, it's time. He's not even on the travel squad.
Yeah.
Rafidi Girmay, who was, the 3rd string center 2 weeks ago, is now the backup left guard. And I don't know. It's, look, these coaches are successful. 6 of them have been in, either won a national championship or been in the college football playoff. They've been on staffs that
they know
have
what
had
it
big
takes.
success. They know what it looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
They got to get it together though, Taylor, because this is not how you. This is the last thing you want toward the end of a season to be trending down. And look, they'll probably handle business against Kansas, but we have to wait and see.
Yeah. At this point, there's no reason for any benefit of the doubt, I think, for Texas. I think that they have to show it. They have to earn it. Just real quick, touching back on what you're saying about if Steve Sarkisian should have put Casey back in when Hudson was struggling. You almost go back to the 2020 Texas-Oklahoma game when Lincoln Riley pulled Spencer Rattler, put in the backup, and then gave Spencer Rattler the chance to go in. And then he ended up winning the game for Oklahoma. And that's, I think, what, hindsight's 2020, obviously, but I think if you're a Texas fan, you probably would have wished that Steve Sarkisian would have handled the, change at quarterback in the first quarter, similar in the way that Lincoln Riley did back in 2020 with Spencer Rattler.
Yeah. And that, Steve, I asked him after the game, did you think about putting Casey back in? He said it crossed my mind, but I decided to, keep going with HUD. And that third quarter was a disaster for the Texas offense and left the defense completely hanging. All right, we're starting to repeat ourselves, Taylor, so we will we'll cut it off here. Plus, they're about to kick me out of the Iowa State press box.
Almost midnight right now, so it's 11:52 p.m.
But listen, we thank everybody for tuning into the Flagship podcast. Make sure that you check out the next episode, which will come out on Monday, as well as all the other podcasts on the Horns 24/7 podcast platform, The Blitz, Recruiting Matters, and of course, subscribe to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Signing off from Ames, Iowa, where Texas loses 30-7 tonight and has now lost 4 straight for the first time since 2010. I am Chip Brown for Taylor Estes. Thanks for listening. Everybody stay safe and keep the faith.